My wife went to the special couples party secretly with another man. When she saw me, she froze, and I felt the ground disappear beneath my feet. I didn't need to say anything, I just turned my back and left, taking with me the certainty that what we once called love had ended there. And that's exactly what happened, something died inside me. There was a song playing in the background, one we had danced to together so many times. So many. And while she held another man's hand, dressed as if that night was about the two of them and not about us, I understood that there was no going back. It wasn't just the physical betrayal, it wasn't just the other man's presence. It was the emotional abandonment that preceded everything. It was the way she laughed. How comfortable she seemed there, as if I had never existed. I didn't just leave the party. I left an entire story. In the following days, she tried to justify herself. She fired off messages that I didn't have the courage to read completely. Some I opened, read the first line, and closed. Others I left unopened, as if the simple act of ignoring them was a shield against the pain of discovering that everything we had built could have been thrown away for one night, or for several. Sometimes, betrayal happens silently, little by little, in small gestures that we let pass. In averted glances, in soulless embraces, in kisses that no longer fit. But the lover's silence said it all. He didn't text, he didn't show up after the mess. He didn't lift a finger for her. And that's when I understood, she didn't trade our love for another. She traded it for nothing. And even so, she lost me. There were days when the pain came like an avalanche. Sleeping was a struggle, waking up was worse. Washing my face in the morning reminded me of her touch, the toothbrush next to mine, the plans made in cafes and supermarkets, the wedding ring that suddenly weighed more than any object I had ever carried. Because it symbolized a lie. I had to take pictures inside the house before changing the furniture. Not to keep memories, but to remember where I didn't want to go back. She appeared once, unannounced, standing at the gate, her eyes swollen and her makeup smeared. She tried to speak, but all that came out of her mouth was a whisper of guilt and a phrase lost between sobs, "I don't know why I did it." And I believed her. I believed she didn't know. But I also understood that it didn't matter anymore. Loving someone who doesn't know why they destroyed what we had is like trying to rebuild a house on the same ground that collapsed. You can try, but you'll always be afraid it will fall again. And then came the emptiness. Not her emptiness. Mine. That absence of plans, of routine, of scent on the pillow. I started going to the market alone, eating out alone, having no one to tell about my day. No one waited for me on the sofa. No one shared the blanket on cold nights. And it was in this cruel silence that, slowly, I began to find myself. I started to realize that my identity wasn't someone's husband, but someone I loved. And that was still within me. It wasn't her who made me a good man. It was me. It was on a Sunday afternoon, sitting on a park bench, reading a book I don't even know if I liked, that she appeared again. Not to apologize. But to tell me that the other man had left. That he hadn't contacted her anymore. That she had understood everything. And suddenly, the woman who had abandoned me for another man was now looking at me as if she realized that true love had been there all along. But I wasn't anymore. Over time, I met someone. A calm gaze, a gentle laugh. Nothing overwhelming, but real. And for the first time in a long time, I felt seen. Not as the betrayed man, not as someone's ex. But as a new beginning. There was something about her that gave me peace. And peace, after the storm, is like a miracle. I wasn't looking for it, I wasn't expecting it. But when you stop trying to fill the void with patches, something whole appears. Years later, by chance, or by irony of fate, I saw her. I was in the park, sitting next to this new woman, laughing, while she taught me some dance steps. And when I looked up, there she was, the woman who was once my wife, now alone, sitting on a bench, looking at me with a mixture of longing and regret. And I knew, in that instant, that she felt the cruelest pain of all, the pain of having lost a true love forever. There were no words. There was no closeness. Just a look. But it was enough to know that she understood. That what she sought in the other man never existed. And what she destroyed between us could never be rebuilt. But, what did she do after that? Well, that, you'll find out eventually. Welcome to the channel. Here, we don't romanticize betrayal. We condemn it. All the stories you hear are fictional but based on painfully real emotional realities, with a single purpose, to show how infidelity destroys lives, sinks relationships, and leaves deep scars. Get ready now for a story, shocking, intense, and unforgettable. Take a deep breath, and feel the weight of a wrong choice. They met on an ordinary day, like so many others that could have gone unnoticed, but it didn't. She was sitting alone in a small cafe, one of those places that seem to have stopped in time, with rustic wooden tables, yellowish light and soft music playing in the background. He rushed in, his shirt wrinkled, his glasses slipping down his nose, and his eyes showing the weariness of someone who had lived more than he should for his age. But there was something in his awkward manner, in the way he apologized for bumping into a lady who was leaving, that made her look up and gaze at him for more than 2 seconds. He noticed. He smiled awkwardly. And from then on, everything seemed inevitable. His name was Daniel. He was 34 years old, a civil engineer, discreet, methodical, with a shy sense of humor and a huge heart that he hid behind short answers and long glances. He came from a simple family, carrying solid values, the kind that can't be bought or learned quickly: respect, loyalty, patience. He always had difficulty trusting people, not out of arrogance, but because he had seen promises turn to dust too quickly. He had learned to walk with both feet on the ground, and not to expect too much from the world, until she appeared. Her name was Emily. 29 years old, a literature teacher, passionate about poetry and anything that evoked feeling. She was expansive, extremely sensitive, and saw beauty in things others ignored. She made friends easily, charmed with her low voice and gentle way of saying things. She had a past with light scars, nothing dramatic, but enough to make her cautious about love. She was the type who gave herself completely when she trusted, but also knew how to withdraw elegantly when she felt the slightest sign that she wasn't welcome. With Daniel, she felt something different from the beginning. A kind of silence that didn't bother her. A kind of companionship that required no effort. They started going out on casual dates, but everything clicked with an almost uncanny naturalness. Their different tastes didn't drive them apart, on the contrary, they created a kind of mutual curiosity. Emily loved art, museums, and strolls through street markets. Daniel preferred simple things: a good movie at home, a long walk without a destination. And it was there, in that contrast, that they built a bond. He listened to her with genuine attention. She made him laugh without him even realizing it. In a few months, they were already sharing keys, childhood stories, and travel plans. Their families met, their friends mingled, and the new house came as a natural consequence, a house built together, chosen by both of them, renovated little by little with love and anticipation. Their home was in a quiet neighborhood, surrounded by trees and silence. It was a modest 2-bedroom house, but every corner held details that revealed the couple's story. Photos on the walls, books stacked on shelves, paintings Emily made on weekends, Daniel's tools left in the garage after failed attempts to fix what wasn't even broken. To the outsider, it was the portrait of a happy couple. To the insider, it was a constant construction, made of compromises and discoveries. Daniel was attentive. Not in a cliché way, but genuinely so. He remembered dates, phrases she'd utter in the middle of random conversations, the songs that made her cry. He'd make coffee before she woke up, leave notes inside the books she read, and insist on picking her up from school even when she said she could take a taxi. Emily, in turn, was the emotional foundation of the relationship. She had a special talent for getting Daniel to talk, for pulling him out of his silence and drawing him into conversations he would never have alone. She was the one who suggested dinners, trips, and different weekends. She was the one who brought color to their routine. For a long time, everything was calm. A good, comfortable, safe calm. They shared the bills, the responsibilities, the fears. They talked about children, even without rushing. They chose together what to watch on TV. They saved money for a future trip to Europe. They made plans to open something together someday, perhaps a literary cafe, where she could organize book clubs and he could take care of the structural part. Everything seemed right. Not perfect, but right. But time is sometimes not just a builder. It also wears things down. And it was gradually, almost imperceptibly, that small cracks began to appear. Nothing glaring. Just the subtle distancing that hides in routine. Emily started coming home later. Tired. Daniel started working more. More quietly. Tiredness became an excuse for nights without conversation. The television began to fill the silence that was once comfortable. Kisses became rarer. Touches, less spontaneous. But even so, there was love. A love that, perhaps, only needed a breather. Daniel noticed, but didn't know how to act. He was the type who felt everything but spoke little. He kept his discomfort to himself, hoping time would correct it. Emily, in turn, began to feel uncomfortable with his passivity. She expected something from him that she couldn't even name. Something more intense, more present. But she didn't ask for it. She didn't say anything. She simply remained silent as well. And in that shared silence, they began to lose each other. And yet, they stayed together. Sharing the same bed, the same commitments, the same social circles. Friends saw them as the ideal couple. Family referred to them as inseparable. And, in a way, they were. The bond was strong. The affection, genuine. But there was something in the air that neither of them could name. An unease lingering, like a light cloud that doesn't rain, but also doesn't go away. Daniel continued doing everything as before. There were days when he prepared her favorite dinner just to see her smile. He bought small, discreet flowers, just the way she liked them. And she thanked him with a kiss on the cheek, a gentle smile. But her eyes didn't always match the gesture. Sometimes he found her staring blankly into space, distant. Other times, she closed her book mid-reading and went to her room without saying anything. When he asked, she said it was just tiredness. And he believed her. He wanted to believe her. Emily started going out more with her friends, coming home later, and checking her phone frequently. And Daniel, even noticing, chose not to confront her. Not out of fear of the response, but out of fear of starting a war he wouldn't know how to escape. He loved that woman. He loved their story. And he thought it was all just a phase, just another curve in the path they had already traveled together, something that would pass. Inside, she felt confused. She wasn't sure what she was looking for. She wasn't unhappy with him. Just, empty. As if something had faded. And this absence left her restless. She began seeking advice in books, from friends, in podcasts. She tried to understand if she was the problem. If she had idealized too much. Or if it was just routine killing the enchantment. Amidst this inner turmoil, she began to close herself off. She began to keep secrets. Small ones at first. But they began to create walls between them. And it was in this scenario that something began to change. Something subtle, invisible, but present. A strange feeling, as if the two were in the same environment, but living in parallel realities. Daniel, trying to rescue. Emily, trying to understand. One trying to hold on. The other, trying to escape. But without words. Without fights. Without confrontations. Then came the invitation to the couple's event. An elegant charity dinner, full of symbolism about partnership, loyalty, and love. An invitation that arrived in the mailbox, addressed to both of them. Daniel placed it on the table, hoping she would see it and comment. She saw it. She read it. But she didn't say anything that day. She just put it in her bag, like someone filing something away they don't know what to do with. Daniel didn't insist. He thought that, as always, they would resolve it together. He just didn't imagine that that night would change everything. But it wasn't time to know that yet. There was still time. There was still silence. There was still hope. Even if fragile, even if on the verge of collapse. Their story wasn't over yet. At least, not for him. Not yet. Daniel arrived at the parking lot, his suit still smelling of lavender, a small wooden box in his jacket pocket. He had spent the last few days in silence, trying not to get his hopes up about that night, trying to believe that there was still room for two in that relationship which, although colder in recent months, was still, for him, an emotional home with open doors. The couple's charity party was one of those symbolic events, seemingly created to remind attendees of the value of love, partnership, and the journey together. He wasn't the type of man who felt comfortable at social events, but he had decided to go anyway, because he believed that small gestures could still rekindle what had faded. He hadn't received a response to the invitation left on the table, but he trusted that, as always, she would show up. That, as always, she would understand. And in a way, she did understand, just not in the way he expected. As soon as he entered the hall, the warm lights and soft music enveloped him in a certain comfort. Couples danced, chatted, laughed. The scent of wine, flowers, and spices wafted through the air. He walked slowly between the tables, searching with his eyes for a familiar face, a familiar figure. That's when time stopped. Ahead, on the other side of the hall, she was there. Not as he had imagined. She wasn't alone. She wasn't looking for him. She didn't seem anxious about his presence. She was with another man. The two were holding hands, laughing, chatting with a couple nearby. The dress she was wearing was the same one he had complimented weeks before, when she arrived home and said she had bought it, on impulse. He didn't know it, but that dress already had a predetermined destiny. She saw him first. And froze. The smile died on her face. Her eyes widened as if she had been caught in a crime from which there was no escape. The man beside her, noticing the sudden change in her expression, followed her gaze and found Daniel standing motionless, with the wooden box still in his pocket and his heart completely broken. No one needed to say anything. The silence was more deafening than any words. Daniel didn't approach. He didn't make a scene. He didn't ask what was happening. He simply turned his back, walked towards the exit as if abandoning not just a party, but an entire story built with faith, with memory, with effort. And in that instant, he knew, that had been the end. There was nothing left to save. In the following days, she tried to justify herself. She sent long messages, full of commas, questions, and regrets. He said he didn't know how to explain. He said it wasn't what it seemed. You said you needed to talk to him. He didn't answer. Not because I didn't want to hear, but because I knew that what needed to be said had already been silently shouted that night. Her words now sounded like echoes of something that had already crumbled. Even so, something inside him still needed to understand. There were still unanswered questions. And that's what made him answer, 2 weeks later, when she appeared at his door with a pale face, sunken eyes, and an expression that mixed shame, despair, and something close to pain. She entered without permission, but he didn't stop her. She sat on the sofa where they had laughed together so many times, and looked around as if that place no longer belonged to her. He stood, arms crossed, waiting. She began to speak quickly, stumbling over her words, like someone trying to put out a fire with buckets of water. She said that the other man meant nothing, that he had been a distraction, a misunderstanding, that things between them were cold, and that she no longer knew how to connect. Daniel listened to her in silence. Until, at a certain point, she said something that changed everything. She said that the man she had been with that night, the one with whom she had shared glances, affection, and probably more than that, hadn't contacted her afterward. She said he had disappeared. That he hadn't answered messages. That he had blocked her number. That he had vanished as if she had never existed. And that since then she had felt a pain she couldn't name. Daniel just stared at her. But then, she revealed something that neither he nor she were prepared to face. He was there. I made a mistake. I betrayed you, yes. But he never promised me anything. He never said he loved me. I thought he would choose me. I thought that, she paused, swallowed hard, but yesterday, I saw him. In the park. And he was with someone else. With his wife. Daniel felt his stomach churn. His breathing became erratic. The pieces began to fall into place like a cruel jigsaw puzzle. The man she had cheated on him with was married. And not only that. She didn't know. Or pretended not to know. But it was clear now, she had been just a whim. A passing mistake for someone who already had a parallel life. And the cruelest part was that, unlike her, he hadn't lost anything. He hadn't lost a house, a love, a home. She was the one who lost everything. She then began to cry, but it wasn't a cry of pure regret. It was a cry of despair. Of someone who had bet everything and lost. Of someone who now had neither the other nor herself. She said she didn't know how to go back. That she didn't know how to move on. That she missed the peace they had, the gestures of care, the mornings together, the way he looked at her even when she wasn't well. She sobbed, saying that this should never have happened. That she felt empty. Daniel listened, but something inside him had already shifted. It was like watching the end of a movie you already knew how it would end. He no longer felt anger. He no longer felt pain. He only felt the end. I saw you yesterday in the park, she said, her voice now lower. You were dancing with her. That woman looked at you the way I used to look at you. And you were smiling. You were happy. Daniel finally sat down. He placed his hands on his knees and took a deep breath. He remained silent for a few seconds before speaking. I didn't want it to be like this. I didn't want to see you like this. But life takes its toll. And it takes its toll in a way that doesn't warn you. You didn't lose me because of him. You lost me the moment you stopped choosing me. Every day. Because that's what love is. Choice. And you chose another path. She tried to get closer, tried to touch him, but he recoiled. He said there was no hatred. He said he forgave her. But that there was no going back. That feelings change, that wounds heal, but leave scars. He said that, however much affection he still felt, there was no longer room to start over with her. That he had found a new peace. A new perspective. A new, comfortable silence. She stood there, looking at him as if witnessing the end of the world. Her eyes pleaded for something that would not come. And he, finally, stood up, walked to the door and opened it, as if inviting someone to leave their own story. And she left. Without saying anything. Without promises. Without a future. That same night, he walked to the park. The woman with the calm gaze was waiting for him. They sat on their usual bench, their hands intertwined. And it was there that he knew, sometimes, it's at the end that life begins again. But what he didn't know yet, was that she wouldn't accept this ending so easily. The weeks that followed that conversation were strange, almost unreal. A silence settled between the past and the present, as if time were trying to rearrange the pieces after a storm. She disappeared completely. She didn't try to contact him anymore, didn't send any more messages, didn't show up at the door, as if she had finally understood that the space she once occupied had been definitively emptied. Daniel, on the other hand, continued slowly but steadily towards a life that, although different from the one he had dreamed of, was beginning to make sense. The pain, which had once been uncomfortable, intense, and profound, now only visited occasionally, in brief memories, in small flashes of a life that would never return. The woman with the calm eyes became his refuge. And more than that, his new home. She didn't demand anything, didn't compete with ghosts, didn't require more than he could give. She simply stayed there, present, whole, with the kind of silent love that heals little by little, without haste, without pressure. Daniel learned to smile again. He began to realize that true love doesn't need to be noisy or made of grand promises. Sometimes, it reveals itself in the simplest gestures, like someone who waits outside a meeting just to walk with you to the car, or who makes your favorite tea without being asked, or who simply holds your hand during a movie, even after months of being together. With her, he didn't need to prove anything. He was accepted with his scars, his silences, his hesitations. And it was in this atmosphere of respect and mutual growth that he found a peace he never thought he would feel again. Meanwhile, Emily entered a painful process of confronting her own conscience. She tried to move on, tried to keep busy, tried to go out with friends, tried to meet new people. But something followed her wherever she went, emptiness. A hole she had dug herself, with her own hands, when she decided to walk outside the path she had so painstakingly built alongside someone who, even imperfect, was genuine. The lover she thought could fill her voids had vanished like dust in the wind. And all that remained was absence. Not only of him, but of herself. She began to avoid the places she used to go with Daniel. She stopped frequenting cafes, bookstores, parks. Once, she went to visit her parents, and she could barely hold her mother's gaze, who didn't need to ask anything. She simply held her hand tightly, with a mixture of compassion and disappointment. It was then that she understood that her choice had not only destroyed a marriage. She had destroyed an entire narrative where she was loved, respected, and cared for. And now, she was no longer the protagonist of anything. She was merely a spectator of a love that continued without her. One Sunday afternoon, walking alone through the park where she had so often gone with Daniel, she saw something that completely paralyzed her. There they were. Sitting on the bench where they used to talk for hours, Daniel and his new companion. They were smiling, and in the middle of their conversation, she stood up and extended her hand to him. They began to dance to the sound of a saxophone played by a street artist. The steps weren't perfect, but there was a harmony between their bodies, between their gazes, between their smiles. And it was at that moment that Emily felt the most painful truth of all pierce her chest: she had lost a love that, even after everything, still existed, only now, for someone else. There were no screams, no tears in public. Just a lump in her throat and an unbearable certainty. What she had destroyed out of vanity and doubt now flourished, strong and beautiful, in the hands of someone who never needed to compete with the past, because the present was all hers. Days later, Daniel received one last letter. Handwritten, with trembling letters, full of regret. Emily asked for forgiveness, not for wanting to return, but for having understood too late what she had lost. She said she understood now that love isn't made of fireworks, but of constancy. That she missed the simplest things, his laughter when he read something funny, the way he adjusted his glasses when he got nervous, the way he held the steering wheel with one hand. She asked for nothing more. She just wanted him to know that she recognized everything he had been. And that she deeply regretted having traded all that for a moment of escape that cost her own peace. Daniel read the letter in silence. He took a deep breath. He didn't cry. He didn't smile. He simply put the letter away in a drawer along with other mementos. That night, he walked to the bedroom, found his partner sitting, reading, and lay down beside her. He touched her face gently, and she, without asking anything, smiled. There was no room for the past there. Only for the construction of what would come next. As for Emily, she moved on, but not in the way she had dreamed. She began to live more introspectively, immersed in work and attempts at inner reconstruction. She started therapy, distanced herself from social circles where she was only remembered as the woman who lost a good man. She moved to a different neighborhood. She changed her hairstyle. She rearranged the furniture in her house. But what she couldn't change was the feeling that, no matter how much time passed, there would always be a man in the world she could have loved for a lifetime, if she hadn't betrayed herself before betraying him. Years later, their paths never crossed again. Not out of fear or resentment, but because some stories truly come to a definitive end. And when you choose to turn the page prematurely, all that remains is the longing for what could have been. Daniel built a new life. With a new woman, new dreams, new purposes. He didn't remain trapped in the past, but he didn't erase it either. He learned to carry his story with dignity, knowing that sometimes, pain is only the beginning of peace. Now that the story has come to an end, we want to know what you thought of this journey marked by choices, losses, and rebirths. Leave your comment below, we want to hear your opinion about this intense ending. And of course, if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, now's the time. Stories like this are told here to make you reflect, feel, and above all, understand that true love deserves to be nurtured every day. Never forget, betrayal doesn't just destroy relationships, it destroys trust, memories, entire histories. It rips the future out by the roots and leaves a void where peace could exist. This channel does not support any kind of betrayal. We are here to show, through fiction, what so many experience in reality. Get ready for more stories like this. Because here, every lost love leaves a lesson.